This is the second video in this Django Spotify clone series. Now in the last video, we created a new Django project and set up everything we needed. So we set up the Django project, the Django app, the URLs, then that's what we did to this point. And I also introduced you to Zeet, which is the platform that we're going to be using for databases, and we're also going to be using Zeet to deploy our application later at the end of this series. So now in this video, what we're going to be doing is to first of all touch this up, because right now all we just have is an hello world text. So we want to integrate our front end template in here, and we're also going to create a database. So we're going to be using a Postgres database from the Zeet platform. So I'm going to show you how to create a Postgres database here and integrate it into the Django project, and let's get straight into that. Now let's get started with integrating the front end template into this project. So what we need to do is to come here. I'm just going to close this terminal. So I'm not quitting the terminal. I'm just like minimizing it. I could close this up, and I could actually close this up. I'm going to leave this for now. So what I'm going to do is to come into the project folder, which is Spotify clone. And I'm going to go into settings.py. So right here in settings.py, what I need to do is to actually look for, so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to look for a variable name template. So it's actually a list, and in there I'm going to look for where I see theirs, and right here in theirs I'm going to add base there underscore there. I'm going to say template. Right now what I'm just doing is that I'm saying whenever we want to use a template file, in this case a template file is just HTML files. So whenever I want to use any HTML file, go into the base directory. I remember earlier in this series I said the base directory, also known as the root directory, is the folder or the directory that contains the manage.py file. So basically it's going into this directory and it's looking for a folder named template. So in that folder, that is where it's going to look for that particular template that we're trying to use. So we have to come in here now and create a new folder named template to make sure that folder is there. And what I'm just going to do is to make sure I have all of the HTML files in these templates. So as I said, when we're trying to request for a particular HTML file, so for example, for the home page, we need this particular index.html file, because this is basically the view for the home page. So if we want to use that, what we're going to do right here is to just return that particular file by saying return render index.html. But when we say that, Django is automatically going to look for that index.html file in this template folder, which is the folder right here, because we specified this. If we don't have this, it's not going to work. So now what I can just do is to quit this for now, and right here in templates I need to make sure that these HTML files are here. So I'm just going to select only the HTML files. So we have index, login, music.html, profile, sign up. This is CSS, and this is HTML. So now that I can see the HTML files, I'm just going to drag it into VS Code right here. So I just need to make sure that it's being dragged, and I'm going to copy it and paste it into template file. So now that I know I have all of that, I can actually use this HTML file now. I'm just going to say return render request index.html. Very easy and very simple. This is how I do it. Now when we're saying render this index.html file, Django automatically knows that it needs to go into templates to look for that file because of what we set in the settings.py. So now if I come back in here and hit refresh, you can now see that we have this particular Spotify template. It's not looking really good right now, and I'm going to explain why, but you can basically now see that we have this Spotify template right here instead of just the basic hello world app. Now the reason why it's not looking good is because we brought in the HTML file, but we actually still have some CSS files that needs to be connected to this HTML file to give it required styling. Now we need to go through another process for that. First of all, we're going to just create a new folder named static. So just the way we have a folder named templates that contains all the template files, we also need to have a folder named static that contains all the static files. And static files is just CSS files, JavaScript files, images, basically any other external file that is we're going to be using in connection to our HTML file. So that is what a static file is in Django. So now I need to just import or drag and drop this CSS files. So I'm just gonna copy all of this. I'm just gonna do the same thing and just make sure I'm bringing it in here and pasting all of that in static. So now that we've pasted it in static, the next thing we need to do is to now also come back into the project, which is, well, if I clone and go to settings.py, so you see the way we did, or we specified the directory for the templates, we need to do exactly the same thing for the static, but kind of in a different way. So as you can see right here, we have static URL, and what I'm just going to do is to come here, and for me to actually get or specify this or configure the static files, I need to have two things. The first one is static root, and what we're just going to do is to say OS. So before we use OS, we need to make sure we have that imported. So we're just going to say import OS. So that is imported. We're going to scroll back down, and now that we have OS, we can say os.path.join base there static. We're also saying go into base directory and look for the static folder, which is this. Now we also need to have one more thing named static files underscore theirs, and this is going to be a list actually. And now we're just going to write exactly the same thing. I'm going to say os.path.join. So we need to make sure this is .join base there static. So this is the actual directory. So static files directory is saying go into static. Let's just, because it's a list, let's just add a comma. But for the static root, so this root is quite more complicated than just the static files there. But what you just need to know is that this shouldn't be static. This should actually be something like static files. This is a better name. They shouldn't really be the same name. So this is where we actually configure the directory for the static files. So as you can see, we say go into static. We can save this. If we come back in here into index.html, you're going to see that it is being connected to the style.css that it needs. But if we come back here, still doesn't make a difference. Now the reason why this doesn't make a difference is just because Django uses a different way to connect static files to the HTML file. So for us to do this, we need to scroll all the way to the top and actually add something named load static. And then right here, what I'm just going to do is to say curly bracket percentage sign static. Then I'm going to add a quote mark. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to say just curly bracket, actually just percentage sign and close curly bracket. Now you need to do this for every single place or every single time you are trying to connect a static file. You need to have this format right immediately in the link section. Now if I save this and come in here and hit refresh, now it's a whole different thing. You can now see that everything is aligned successfully. The static file is working. Now there's just only one problem that you might tell. So as I said, you need to actually have this styling or this format every single time you are linking a CSS file, an image, whatever it is. You need to have this. The reason why we're not having that when we're linking all of these images is just because these images are links from the internet. So as you can see, all of these are actual HTTP links. If I scroll down very well, you can see all the HTTP links. If they were images from the static files, we also need to have all of this particular format. So imagine you have, like, let's say 20 different places in your HTML file where you're using this or where you're trying to link different static files. It's gonna be quite time consuming to add this format for every single one manually, because, and I feel like it makes you less productive, because it's important, but it's something that could be quicker, could be done quicker. So this was why I created a Django extension called Auto Django. So if you come into extensions, so I actually use it a lot myself. I created it because it was a problem I faced, and now I use it so much. So you just come into extensions and search Auto Django, and you actually see this extension. Once you install this extension, you can quit it. And if you come back here, what you just need to do, I'm actually going to remove this so I can show you how it works. So if you come back here, what you just need to do is to say Command Shift P. So just say Command Shift P, type that, and you're going to see Auto Django, or you could just type to look for it, Auto Django. So once you get it, just click on it, and it's automatically going to add all the static files every single place on your HTML project. This is very good. The only thing you need to do manually is to add this load static, and I'm probably going to also fix that later. But this is very good because all you just need to do is to just say Command Shift P, and that is going to add the static styling or the static format for every single time you're trying to link a static file. So I just decided to add that in there because I thought it was very helpful. So now we save that once again, and if we come here, it shouldn't really make a difference because we've already added the front end. So this is what we need to do in terms of the front end. I think this is working, and we've done the main part of the styling. So we've added the template, the static files, and we've also connected the index.html. So this should be good for now. Now the next thing that we're going to do is to use Zeet to create our Postgres database. So this Postgres database is actually going to be deployed on AWS. So we're going to be using AWS as the cloud. So we're going to create, as I said, a Postgres database on Zeet, and we're going to connect it into our Django project. But before we can create this particular database, we first need to connect the cloud into our Zeet application, into our Zeet profile. So as I said, we're going to be using AWS. So what you need to do once you're signed into Zeet, so first of all, go to zeet.co and make sure you have an account and you've signed in. Once you've signed in, come under clouds right here, and then click on Connect Cloud and click on Amazon Web Services. Now once you do this, it's going to ask you to input your AWS account ID. Now make sure you log into AWS, and then on the top right corner, click on the drop down and copy the account ID. So once you copy that account ID, you can head back over to Zeet and paste that account ID in there. And all you just need to do is to click on add. So this is going to add the AWS account, but now you need to authorize it. So authorize with IAM, and that is going to basically open this link. So just follow my steps, and what you just need to do is to scroll all the way to the bottom. You don't need to touch anything. Click on I acknowledge, and then create stack. So this is going to create the stack in it's not going to take a long time, probably in a few minutes, sometimes seconds. And once that is done, I'm going to be back. So this has successfully created. Now we can come back in here. I'm just going to close this up and actually close the AWS tab too. And as you can see, it says that my AWS account is successfully connected. Now what I'm just going to do is to come back into projects, and for me to create this Postgres database, I'm going to come under blueprints. So under blueprints, I'm just going to say view blueprints, and what I could just do is to search Postgres. And right here, as you can see, we're going to use AWS RDS. So right here where you see Postgres RDS, let's just make sure. So right here, this is what we want. So we don't really want this Postgres Kubernetes one. We're just going to click on this, and we're going to create project. So what we're just going to do is to use this cloud provider, which is the AWS that we connected. And right here, I'm just going to say continue. And for the input, so I'm just going to say the engine should be 15.2, which is the latest one. And the database name can be Postgres, and the database username can be root. And this is going to be the password. We don't want to see it right now. So now I'm just going to click on continue. And right here, this is the group name, subgroup name, and the project name. We could just deploy. And this should deploy in a few seconds or minutes. So as you can see right here, it's deploying. Once again, I'm going to be back once this has been successfully deployed. So now as you can see, this Postgres database has been deployed successfully. And right here, you can see that we also have our database connection info. Now this database connection info is what we're actually going to use to connect this database that we created into our Django project. So what I'm just going to do right now is to actually come back into our Django project, and right here where we have this settings.py, I'm going to scroll all the way down to where I see databases. So in this databases, I'm actually going to just, let me just copy, paste. I'm just going to comment this out. But now I'm going to change some stuff in here. So right here in databases, we have default. So from the engine, we're going to be using a different engine. So as default, Django uses SQLite, but for this project, we want to use PostgreSQL. So instead of saying django.db.backends.sqlite3, we're going to say .postgresql. And now for the name of the database, I'm just going to get rid of this. And the name of this database right here is going to be this database right here in the database connection info. So we're just going to copy Postgres and I'm just going to paste that in there. And the next thing that we want to do is the user. I'm just actually going to write all of this out before moving forward. And the next thing is the password. And after writing the password, we need to have the host. And then we need to have the port. So now what I'm just going to do is to come back in here to get the user. So the user is this database username, which is root. So you just need to copy that and then paste it in. And for the password, we're going to come back in here. So I'm just going to make sure that it's pasted. Password, come back here. Just copy the password, paste that in. For the host, I'm going to come back in here. And the host is basically database host name. Copy that also, paste that in. And for the port, so I'm going to come back here. The port is 5432. I'm just going to paste that in and hit save. So this is how to configure this database that we've created. This is how to connect it from Zit into our Django application. Now I'm just going to quit this settings.py and just open up a new terminal and run that again. So python3 manage.py run server, that should run this. So it's taking a bit of time right here, and most of the time when this is not working is either because the Postgres is not configured properly or it hasn't basically connected. But what I was going to explain is, remember when we created when we tried to run this server earlier in this tutorial, in the first episode of this series, and it showed us an error saying there have been some unapplied migration. Now this unapplied migration is just basically saying that we have some database that Django has created as default, but they haven't been migrated into the database we are using for this project. So in Django basically create database table as default. They create user tables for authentication, they create group tables, they create a bunch. They also create session tables so you can know when last the user logged in, stuff like that. So Django creates all of those tables, and when you create a new database, you need to migrate all of those tables into that new database. Now for you to do that, you just need to run python3 manage.py. We should first run make migrations, but it was not going to change anything, so it's also stuck at this. Now we can just come into settings.py. Let's remove this and just put this as an integer value and just make sure that we save that. And also we're going to come into Zit, and in this particular Postgres that we created, in settings we're going to switch to the settings tab. So on here where you see exposed to public, yours won't be toggled on, so make sure you toggle that on and click on save. So once you have that, let's come back now and try that command again. So we're just going to say python3 manage.py make migrations, and that should just say no changes detected. And I could actually just close this. So it says it's not saved. Just gonna, this should be what we need. And now what I'm just gonna do is to say python3 manage.py migrate. So this migrate, now we migrate all those database tables I talked about into this Postgres database that we just created. So as you can see, it is successfully doing all the migrations that we need, and that should be working. So just gonna make sure that all the migrations works. We're just gonna give that a second. As you can see, it says auth. So This is for the username, the email, last login, every single thing that we need. And this was the sessions I also talked about. So everything that we need, Django kind of provided that as default. So everything we need in terms of authentication, Django provided that. So now that we have this, we can now finally run the project again without getting any warnings. So Python 3 manage.py run server, and that should just run successfully. Good. So now that that is running, I could close that and I could finally come back in here and just hit refresh, and that should be good. So now what I've done is I connected the front end and I also set up the database that we need. So what we can just do to actually view this database is two things. We can just open up this Postgres database on pgadmin, but we're not going to need to do that. That is because Django created or gave us a default Django admin panel where we can see our database, edit our database, add anything, change anything. So I'm also going to be using that a lot in this video, and I'm going to show you, we're going to be using that in this series, and I'm going to show you how we're going to use that in the next episodes of this series. So just to recap, what we did in this video is that we configured the template for this particular homepage. Now we can see this Spotify homepage as a nice looking UI. And the next thing we did was to create our database on Zit. So we created a Postgres RDS database that was deployed onto AWS using Terraform. So you don't even really need to know all of those details because Zit kind of just makes everything easier. So what you just need to know is that we created a Postgres managed database and we connected that database right here to our Django application, and everything is working perfectly. And in the next video, what we're going to do is to now move forward with building most of the actual features of this particular Spotify clone series. So thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to click on the like button and subscribe. That really helps the channel a lot. And if you have any question or you have anything to say, don't forget to drop a comment about it in the comment down below. So thank you so much once again, and I'll see you in the next one.